I never thought the woman who brought me into this world would be the one to try and destroy me when I needed her most. But when I told my mother I was pregnant at 19, she didn't offer comfort or support. Instead, she raised her hand and struck me so hard across the face that I tasted blood. "You're nothing but a disgrace," she spat, her eyes filled with a rage I'd never seen before, "just like your worthless father." That was the moment I realized that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who hurt you the most. My name is Maya, and I want to share with you the most painful chapter of my life, because I know there are others out there who have felt the sting of rejection from the very people who were supposed to protect them. It was a Tuesday morning in October when my world came crashing down. I remember it so clearly because it was one of those perfect fall days where the leaves were just starting to turn golden, and there was that crisp feeling in the air that usually made me feel hopeful about the future. I was 19 years old, a sophomore at the local community college, working part-time at a coffee shop to help pay for my classes. I lived at home with my mother, Patricia, in our small 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of town. My mother and I had always been close, or at least I thought we were. After my father left when I was just 3 years old, it had been just the two of us against the world. She worked double shifts as a nurse's aide to keep us afloat, and I tried my best to be the perfect daughter. I kept my grades up, stayed out of trouble, and helped with the bills as soon as I was old enough to work. Patricia was a deeply religious woman. We attended St. Mary's Baptist Church every Sunday without fail, and she served on the church council. She always told me that our reputation in the community mattered, that people looked up to us, and that I needed to be an example for other young women. "The Johnson women are strong," she would say. "We don't make mistakes that we can't come back from." I had been feeling sick for weeks. At first, I thought it was just stress from school and work. I was taking 15 credit hours and working 25 hours a week, so exhaustion seemed natural, but when the nausea wouldn't go away, and I realized I was late, a terrible fear began to creep into my heart. David Martinez and I had been dating for 8 months. He was a good guy, 20 years old, working construction while taking night classes to become an electrician. We were careful most of the time, but there had been one night in August when we got caught up in the moment. One night when our love felt bigger than our caution. I bought 3 pregnancy tests from 3 different stores, too embarrassed to buy them all in one place. I took them in the bathroom at the coffee shop during my break, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold them steady. All 3 came back positive. For 2 weeks, I carried this secret alone. I watched my mother hum while she cooked dinner, saw her smile when she talked about my future, heard her brag to the church ladies about how proud she was of me. And all the while, this knowledge sat in my chest like a stone, getting heavier every day. I knew I had to tell her. Despite my fear, part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, she would surprise me. Maybe the woman who had held me when I cried over scraped knees and celebrated every small victory in my life would find a way to support me through this too. I planned it carefully. I made her favorite dinner, fried chicken, mashed potatoes and green beans. I cleaned the apartment until it sparkled. I even bought her favorite flowers, yellow carnations, and put them in a vase on the kitchen table. I thought if I created the perfect atmosphere, if I showed her how much I loved and respected her, it might soften the blow. After dinner, we sat on the couch watching her favorite TV show, one of those gospel programs where people shared their testimonies about overcoming hardship. During a commercial break, I turned to her. "Mama," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something important." She muted the television and turned to face me, her expression curious but warm. "What is it, baby girl?" I took a deep breath, trying to find the courage I had practiced in the mirror for days. "Mama, I'm pregnant." The change in her face was immediate and terrifying. The warmth drained from her eyes, replaced by something cold and hard that I had never seen before. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed, then opened again. "What did you say?" Her voice was dangerously quiet. "I'm pregnant, Mama. About 6 weeks along." For a moment, there was complete silence. Then she stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled in a way that scared me more than if she had started screaming immediately. "Pregnant," she repeated, the word dripping with disgust. "My daughter. My perfect daughter who was going to make something of herself. Pregnant like some common street girl. Mama, please." That's when she slapped me. Hard. So hard that my head snapped to the side and I saw stars. The shock was worse than the pain. In 19 years, my mother had never laid a hand on me in anger. "Don't you Mama please me," she snarled. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you have any idea what people are going to say, what the church is going to think? I held my hand to my burning cheek, tears streaming down my face. I thought you might understand. I thought you might help me figure out what to do. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was a bitter, ugly sound. Help you? Help you what? Help you ruin both our lives. Help you throw away everything I've worked for. It's not the end of the world, Mama. People make mistakes. Mistakes. She was shouting now, her face twisted with rage. You call this a mistake? You call destroying our family's reputation a mistake? I tried to reach for her, but she jerked away from me like my touch burned her. Who is it? She demanded. Who is the father of this thing? David. You know David. You like him. That Mexican boy. The way she said it made my stomach turn. I had never heard her speak with such venom before. His name is David, and he's a good person. He cares about me. He cares about you. She was pacing now, her hands clenched into fists. If he cared about you, he wouldn't have ruined your life. If he cared about you, he would have kept his hands to himself. Mama, it wasn't just him. We both. She whirled around to face me, her eyes blazing. Don't you dare stand there and tell me you wanted this. Don't you dare try to convince me that my daughter, the girl I raised to know better, the girl I trusted to make good choices, would willingly throw her life away for some boy. The accusation in her voice, the way she was looking at me like I was a stranger, like I was something disgusting she'd found on the bottom of her shoe, it was breaking my heart. I didn't plan this. I whispered. But it happened, and now we need to figure out what to do next. I need your help, Mama. I need my mother. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Something that looked almost like the woman who used to sing me lullabies and check under my bed for monsters. But then it was gone, replaced by that terrible coldness. Your mother? She said quietly. Your mother raised you better than this. Your mother sacrificed everything to give you a chance at a decent life. Your mother worked herself to the bone so you could go to college and make something of yourself. And this is how you repay me. She walked to the window and stood there with her back to me, her shoulders rigid. You're just like him, she said finally, her voice so low I almost couldn't hear her. Just like your worthless father. I should have known. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Those words hit me like a physical blow. My father was the one person she never talked about, the one subject that was completely off limits in our house. All I knew was that he had left us when I was little, and that mentioning him was the quickest way to see pain flash across my mother's face. Mama, that's not fair. She turned around and I saw that she was crying. But these weren't sad tears. They were tears of rage and disappointment and something that looked almost like hatred. Fair. She laughed that ugly laugh again. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when he left me alone with a 3-year-old and no money? Was it fair when I had to drop out of nursing school because I couldn't afford childcare? Was it fair when I had to work 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads? I stared at her, confused. What does that have to do with everything? She screamed. It has everything to do with this? I broke my back to make sure you didn't end up like me. I sacrificed my dreams so you could have dreams of your own. And you've thrown it all away for what? For some boy who's going to disappear the minute things get hard. David isn't going anywhere. He loves me. Love. She spat the word like it tasted bad. You think love pays the bills. You think love is going to finish your education. You think love is going to give that baby a future. She was advancing on me now, her finger pointed at my face. Let me tell you something about love, little girl. Love is what made me stupid enough to believe your father when he promised me forever. Love is what made me ignore all the red flags and warning signs. Love is what ruined my life, and now it's ruining yours. I had never heard her talk about my father before, had never heard her voice this much pain and bitterness. Part of me wanted to ask more questions, to finally understand the story she had kept hidden from me all these years. But the larger part of me was too scared, too hurt by her reaction to focus on anything except the hatred in her eyes. I'm not you, Mama, I said quietly, and David isn't my father. That's when she hit me again. Harder this time. Hard enough that I stumbled backward and nearly fell over the coffee table. Don't you ever, she hissed, compare your situation to mine. Don't you ever presume to understand what I went through. I touched my lip and my fingers came away bloody. I stared at the blood, unable to believe that my own mother had done this to me. I can't believe you hit me. I whispered. I can't believe you got yourself pregnant. She shot back. But here we are. We stood there looking at each other across the small living room that suddenly felt like a canyon. This woman who had been my whole world, my safety net, my biggest supporter, was looking at me like I was her enemy. So what happens now? I asked, my voice breaking. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and straightened her shoulders. When she spoke, her voice was cold and final. No, you fix this mess. You call that boy and tell him you're taking care of it. You make an appointment at that clinic downtown. And then we never speak of this again. You want me to get an abortion. I want you to undo this mistake before it destroys both our lives. I shook my head slowly. I can't do that, Mama. You can't, or you won't. Both. Her face hardened even more. If that was possible, then you've made your choice. What does that mean? She walked to the front door and opened it, holding it wide. It means you can pack your things and get out of my house. If you want to ruin your life, you can do it somewhere else. I won't watch it happen, and I won't let you drag me down with you. I couldn't breathe. You're kicking me out. You're 18. I'm 19. You're old enough to make adult decisions, so you're old enough to live with the consequences. Adult consequences. I stared at her, this woman who had raised me, who had been my whole family for as long as I could remember. She was standing there holding the door open, waiting for me to leave, and there wasn't even a flicker of doubt in her expression. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Maybe you should have thought about that before you opened your legs for the first boy who paid you attention. The cruelty of those words, the deliberate intent to wound me as deeply as possible, finally broke something inside me. I started to sob deep, ugly sobs that came from somewhere so deep I didn't even know it existed. Please, Mama, I begged. Please don't do this. I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing. I need you. For just a second, I thought I saw her falter. I thought I saw the mother I knew struggling against this stranger who had taken her place. But then she looked away and her voice came out flat and emotionless. You should have thought about that before. I realized then that no amount of pleading was going to change her mind. This was really happening. My mother was really throwing me out of the only home I had ever known. With shaking hands, I gathered up my purse and my jacket. As I walked past her toward the door, I stopped and looked at her one more time. I love you, Mama, I whispered. No matter what you think of me right now, I love you. She didn't respond. She didn't even look at me. I walked out into the October night, and I heard the door close behind me with a finality that echoed in my chest. As I stood on the sidewalk in front of the apartment building where I had lived my entire life, I placed my hand over my stomach where my baby was growing. It's just you and me now, I whispered into the darkness. But I promise you, little one, I will never make you feel the way she just made me feel. I will love you no matter what. That was the beginning of the hardest journey of my life. But it was also the beginning of discovering a strength I never knew I had. I stood on that sidewalk for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The October air was getting colder, and I realized I didn't even have a sweater. I had rushed out with just my purse, my phone, and the clothes on my back, a thin t-shirt, and jeans that suddenly felt like no protection against the world at all. My first instinct was to call David. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial his number, and when I heard his voice answer, "Hey beautiful," in that warm way he always greeted me, I completely broke down. "Maya, what's wrong? You're scaring me." Through my tears, I managed to choke out, "She threw me out, David. My mama threw me out." "What? Hold on, slow down. Where are you?" I'm standing outside my building. I told her about the baby and she hit me, David. She hit me and called me terrible things and told me to get out." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long that I thought he might have hung up. My heart started racing with a new kind of panic. What if he reacted the same way? What if this was too much for him too? "I'm coming to get you," he said finally, and I could hear him moving around, grabbing keys. "Stay right where you are. Don't go anywhere. I'll be there in 10 minutes. David, we'll figure this out, Maya. I promise you, we'll figure this out together." Those 10 minutes felt like the longest of my life. I kept looking up at our apartment window, part of me hoping to see my mother's face there, hoping she would come down and tell me she was sorry, that she had just panicked and didn't mean any of it. But the window stayed dark. A few neighbors walked by, people I had known my whole life, people who went to church with us. Mrs. Rodriguez from 2B smiled and waved like nothing was wrong. If only she knew that the perfect Johnson girl she always complimented my mother on was now homeless and pregnant, standing on the street with a bloody lip and nowhere to go. When David's beat-up Honda pulled up to the curb, I had never been so grateful to see anyone in my life. He jumped out and ran to me, taking my face in his hands and examining the cut on my lip with gentle fingers. "She did this to you." His voice was tight with controlled anger. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without falling apart again. "Come on," he said, wrapping his arm around me and leading me to the car. "Let's get you somewhere safe." David lived in a small studio apartment above his uncle's auto shop. It wasn't much, just one room with a kitchenette, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, and a bed that doubled as a couch. But when he opened that door and turned on the lights, it felt like sanctuary. "Sit," he said, pointing to the bed. "Let me get you some ice for your face." While he rummaged around in his tiny freezer, I looked around the space that might become my new home. There were tools scattered on the small table, textbooks from his night classes stacked on the floor, and work clothes draped over a chair. It smelled like motor oil and the cologne he wore to try to cover it up. It was so different from the neat, carefully decorated apartment I had just been thrown out of. David came back with a bag of frozen peas wrapped in a dish towel and gently pressed it to my swollen lip. Then he sat down next to me and pulled me close. "Tell me everything," he said, so I did. I told him about the weeks of feeling sick, about taking the pregnancy tests, about carrying the secret alone, while I tried to figure out how to tell him and my mother. I told him about the dinner I had made, the flowers I had bought, how carefully I had planned the conversation, thinking it would somehow make the news easier to hear. I told him about the look in my mother's eyes when I said the words, about the slap that came so fast I didn't see it coming, about the terrible things she had said. I told him about her comparing me to my father, about her demanding I get an abortion, about being ordered out of the only home I had ever known. David listened to all of it without interrupting. When I was finished, he was quiet for a long time, just holding me and stroking my hair. "I should have been there," he said finally. "I should have been there when you told her. It wouldn't have mattered. She was so angry, David. I've never seen her like that before. It was like she became a completely different person. Maybe she just needs time to process it. Maybe when she calms down." I shook my head. "You didn't see her face. You didn't hear the way she talked to me. She meant every word." David was quiet again, and I could practically hear him thinking. Finally, he took my hands in both of his. "Maya, I need you to know something. I need you to understand that I'm not going anywhere. Your mom thinks I'm going to disappear when things get tough. Well, things just got tough, and I'm right here." Fresh tears started flowing down my cheeks. "You don't understand what you're signing up for. I don't have anywhere to live. I don't have any money saved up. I can't ask you to up." "You're not asking. I'm telling you. You're staying here, with me for as long as you need to. We're going to figure this out together. David, this place is barely big enough for one person." He looked around the tiny studio and shrugged. "So we'll make it work. People have raised families in smaller spaces than this." "Family." The word came out as barely a whisper. He placed his hand over mine, over the place where our baby was growing. "Family. You, me, and this little person we made together. That's our family now." I stared at him, this boy who was barely 20 years old, who worked construction during the day and went to school at night, who lived paycheck to paycheck in a studio apartment above his uncle's shop. He was offering me everything he had without hesitation. "Are you scared?" I asked him. "Terrified," he admitted with a small laugh, "but being scared doesn't change anything. We're having a baby, Maya, and I want this baby. I want to be a father. I want to be the kind of father I never had." I knew David's story. His own father had left when he was 12, abandoning David, his mother, and his two younger sisters without a word of explanation or a forwarding address. His mother had struggled to raise 3 kids alone, working multiple jobs and barely keeping their heads above water. David had been working since he was 14, helping to support his family while trying to stay in school himself. "What are we going to do?" I asked. "I mean practically. About money, about school, about everything." David stood up and started pacing the small space, his mind clearly working through the logistics. "Okay, let's think about this step by step. First, you need to see a doctor. Make sure everything's okay with the baby and figure out what kind of prenatal care you need." I nodded. I hadn't even thought about that yet. "Second, we need to figure out the money situation. I'm making decent money at the construction site, and Uncle Miguel has been talking about giving me more hours." "You're still working at the coffee shop, right?" "I guess. I mean, I haven't quit or anything. But I don't know how I'm going to get there from here. And what happens when I start showing? What happens when morning sickness gets worse? We'll figure it out day by day. Maybe you can pick up more hours now, while you're feeling okay, and then cut back later if you need to. He sat back down next to me, taking my hands again. And school. We're both going to stay in school. It might take us longer to graduate, but we're going to do it. This baby is going to have parents with college degrees. I wanted to believe him, wanted to share his optimism and determination, but the practical realities kept crashing over me like waves. David, what if your uncle doesn't want me staying here? What if the landlord finds out and says I can't live here because I'm not on the lease? What if? Hey. He tilted my chin up so I had to look at him. What if the sky falls down? What if aliens invade? What if the world ends tomorrow? We can't live our lives worrying about every possible thing that might go wrong. But some of these things are likely to go wrong. Then we'll deal with them when they happen. Right now, tonight, you have a place to sleep in someone who loves you. Tomorrow we'll tackle tomorrow's problems. Someone who loves you. He had never said those words before, not directly like that. Do you really? I asked quietly. Love me, I mean. Even now, with all this mess and complications. He leaned over and kissed me softly, carefully avoiding my injured lip. Maya, I loved you before I knew about the baby, and I love you more now. You're carrying my child. You're brave enough to keep this baby even when your own mother turned her back on you. How could I not love you? For the first time since I had walked out of my mother's apartment, I felt like maybe everything wasn't completely hopeless. Maybe David was right. Maybe love really could be enough to build something on. What do we tell people? I asked. At work, at school, at church. David's expression darkened at the mention of church. Are you planning to keep going to your mother's church? I hadn't thought about it. St. Mary's Baptist had been such a huge part of my life, such a source of community and identity. But the idea of walking in there and facing all those people who knew my mother, who would undoubtedly hear her version of the story. I don't think I can, I said, at least not for a while. Good. Because honestly, Maya, any church that would judge you for this, any church that would support your mother throwing you out instead of helping you, that's not a church worth going to. I knew he was right, but it still hurt. It was another loss on top of all the others. We'll find a new church, David said, reading my expression. A church that believes in forgiveness and compassion instead of judgment. A church that will welcome our little family. Our little family. The phrase was starting to feel real, starting to feel possible. Are you hungry? David asked. You need to eat. The baby needs you to eat. I realized I hadn't eaten since lunch, and that had been just a few crackers because my stomach had been too nervous about telling my mother to handle anything more substantial. I could eat something, I admitted. David grinned and jumped up. Then you're in luck, because I make the best scrambled eggs in 3 counties. I laughed despite everything. Is that so? It's so. My mother taught me before she decided I was old enough to fend for myself. It's basically the only thing I can cook that's actually edible. I watched him move around the tiny kitchenette, cracking eggs into a bowl and humming under his breath. This boy, who had just had his whole life turned upside down, was humming while he cooked eggs for me. This boy who was barely making ends meet had just invited me to share his 1-room apartment without a second thought. David, I said. Yeah. He looked over his shoulder while stirring the eggs. Thank you, for not running away, for not making me feel like this is all my fault, for not making me handle this alone. He turned off the burner and came over to me, cupping my face in his hands. Maya, you are never going to have to handle anything alone again. I mean that? Whatever comes next, whatever problems we face, whatever people say about us, we face it together. Okay? I nodded, not trusting my voice. And Maya, your mother was wrong about everything she said to you tonight. You're not a disgrace. You're not worthless. You're not like your father, whoever he was. You're strong and smart and beautiful, and any mother should be proud to call you her daughter. The tears started again, but this time they weren't entirely sad. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something that might have been the beginning of hope. Now eat your eggs, David said, handing me a plate. Because tomorrow we start building our new life, and we're gonna need our strength. As I took the first bite of what were actually pretty good scrambled eggs, I looked around David's tiny studio apartment. Tomorrow I would have to figure out how to get my things from my mother's place. Tomorrow I would have to call my boss and explain why I might need different hours. Tomorrow I would have to start the process of creating a whole new life from scratch. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I wasn't facing any of it alone. Tonight I had someone who loved me, someone who wanted this baby, someone who was willing to build a family with me, even if it meant starting with nothing but love and determination. It wasn't the life I had planned. It wasn't the safe, predictable future I had imagined. But as I sat in that small room with David planning our next steps, I began to think that maybe, just maybe, it could be something even better. Maybe my mother had been wrong about more than just me. Maybe she had been wrong about love too. I woke up the next morning in David's arms, sunlight streaming through the small window above his bed. For just a moment, in that space between sleep and waking, I forgot where I was and why. Then reality came crashing back, and with it, the dull ache in my jaw where my mother had hit me. David was already awake, watching me with concerned eyes. "How do you feel?" he asked softly. I touched my lip gingerly. The swelling had gone down, but there was still a small cut, like I got hit by a truck, but better than last night. "Good, I made coffee." He nodded toward the kitchenette where a small pot was brewing. "And I called my supervisor. I'm not going to the job site today." "David, no. You can't miss work because of me." "I'm not missing work because of you. I'm taking care of my family. There's a difference." He sat up and stretched, his back cracking. "We have things to do today. Important things." I sat up too, suddenly aware of how cramped we both were on his narrow bed. This was going to take some getting used to. "What kind of things?" "First, we're going to get your stuff from your mom's place. Then we're going to find you a doctor. Then we're going to go to the community college and talk to someone about your financial aid situation." The thought of going back to my mother's apartment made my stomach clench with anxiety. What if she won't let me in? What if she throws my stuff away? Then we'll deal with that. "But Maya, those are your belongings. Your clothes, your books, your important papers. You have a right to them." He was right, but that didn't make the prospect any less terrifying. What if she's there? Then I'll be there too. She's not going to hurt you again, not while I'm around. I looked at this boy who was barely older than me, who was maybe 5'8" and thin from working construction, and I wondered how he planned to protect me from my mother's rage. But there was something in his voice, a quiet strength that made me believe him anyway. "Okay," I said, "let's do it." After quick showers, David going first while I tried to figure out how two people were going to share this tiny bathroom on a daily basis, we drove across town to my old neighborhood. My mother's car wasn't in her usual parking spot, which was both a relief and a worry. Relief because I wouldn't have to face her, worry because I didn't know where she was or when she might come back. David parked right in front of the building and turned to me. "Do you have your key?" I checked my purse. "Yes." "Okay, we go in, we get your stuff as quickly as possible, and we get out. If she comes back while we're there, I do the talking." "Deal?" I nodded, though my hands were shaking as we walked up to the familiar front door. The apartment felt different when I opened the door. Colder somehow, even though the temperature was the same. It smelled like the cleaning products my mother always used, but underneath that was something else. The lingering scent of last night's anger and hurt. "Where's your room?" David asked, all business. I led him down the short hallway to my small bedroom. Everything looked exactly the same as when I had left for school yesterday morning. My bed was made with the yellow comforter my mother had bought me for my 18th birthday. My desk still had my textbooks scattered across it from studying the night before. The picture of my mother and me at my high school graduation was still on my nightstand, both of us smiling like we didn't have a care in the world. It felt like looking at someone else's life. "Okay," David said, opening my closet and pulling out my old duffel bag. "Clothes first. Just pack the essentials for now. We can come back for the rest later if we need to." I started pulling items from my dresser, trying to think practically about what I would need most. Work clothes for the coffee shop. A few nice outfits for school. Underwear and pajamas. My winter coat. But everything felt strange to touch, like these clothes belonged to the girl I used to be before my world fell apart. David was being amazingly efficient, folding my clothes and fitting them into the bag like a puzzle. I had never seen him be so organized before. "What about your books?" he asked. "And your school stuff?" I gathered up my textbooks, notebooks, and laptop. Then I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my important papers. Birth certificate, social security card, passport, bank statements. My mother had always been careful to teach me to keep these documents safe. I guess I never imagined I'd need them to prove my identity when starting a new life without her. In the bottom of the drawer, I found something that made me pause. It was a small jewelry box that had been my grandmother's. My father's mother, not my mother's. Inside was the only thing I had from my father's side of the family, a simple silver necklace with a tiny cross pendant. My mother had given it to me on my 16th birthday, saying it had belonged to my grandmother, and that she thought I was old enough to have it. She had never told me much about my father's family, just that they had all passed away before I was old enough to remember them. Looking at the necklace now, I wondered what other stories about my father she had kept from me. Maya. David's voice brought me back to the present. You okay? I held up the necklace. This was my grandmother's. My father's mother. David looked at it for a moment, then gently took it from me and fastened it around my neck. There, now you have something from both sides of your family. I don't know anything about them, I said. My mom never talked about my dad's family. I don't even know their names. Maybe someday you'll find out, David said. But right now, let's focus on getting out of here. We finished packing quickly, filling the duffel bag and a large backpack with everything I thought I might need immediately. As we were getting ready to leave, I took one last look around my room. On impulse, I grabbed the photo from my nightstand, the one of my mother and me at graduation. I wasn't ready to throw away 18 years of good memories just because of one terrible night. We were just loading the bags into David's car when I heard a voice behind me. Maya. Is that you? Honey, I turned around to see Mrs. Rodriguez walking toward us with a concerned expression. She was carrying a bag of groceries and looked like she was coming back from her morning shopping trip. Hi, Mrs. Rodriguez, I said, trying to sound normal. Her eyes went immediately to the cut on my lip and her expression changed. What happened to your face? Mija? I touched my lips self-consciously. I fell. It's nothing. She looked skeptical, then noticed David loading bags into the car. Are you moving out? Where's your mother? She's at work? I lied. I'm just staying with David for a while. Mrs. Rodriguez had known me since I was a little girl. She had babysat me sometimes when my mother worked double shifts. She knew me well enough to know when something wasn't right. Maya, she said gently, is everything okay? You know you can talk to me, right? If something's wrong at home. For a moment, I was tempted to tell her everything. Mrs. Rodriguez had always been kind to me, had always treated me like one of her own grandchildren. But what could she do? And what if she decided my mother was right? What if she thought I was a disgrace too? Everything's fine, I said again. Really? She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. Well, you know where I live if you need anything. And Maya, you tell your mother I said hello. I will. I promised, knowing I probably never would. As we drove away, I watched my old neighborhood disappear in the rearview mirror. David reached over and took my hand. That wasn't so bad, he said. No, I agreed, it wasn't. But the hardest part wasn't getting my things. The hardest part was the silence. The hardest part was that my phone hadn't rung once. Not a single text message asking if I was okay, if I had somewhere to stay, if I needed anything. My mother had made it clear that as far as she was concerned, I no longer existed. Our next stop was the community health clinic on the east side of town. David had found it online, a place that offered sliding scale fees for people without insurance or with limited income. The waiting room was crowded with women in various stages of pregnancy, crying babies, and tired-looking partners. I filled out form after form, providing information about my medical history, my mother's medical history, my financial situation. In the space marked emergency contact, I wrote David's name and phone number. It was strange to think that this boy I had been dating for 8 months was now officially the most important person in my life. When they finally called my name, David started to get up with me. I'm sorry, the nurse said kindly, but only patients are allowed in the exam room. I felt a surge of panic. I wanted David with me for this first appointment, wanted his hand to hold when the doctor confirmed what I already knew. It's okay, David said, squeezing my hand. I'll be right here when you come out. The exam confirmed what the pregnancy tests had told me. 6.5 weeks along, due date in late May. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, went through all the basics with me. Prenatal vitamins, what to eat, what to avoid, warning signs to watch for. Do you have questions about your options? She asked carefully. Options? Some women in your situation choose to explore alternatives. If you're interested in discussing that, I can provide you with information about resources. I understood what she was asking. My mother would have wanted me to say yes, to take the pamphlets about abortion clinics and end this problem. Before it got any bigger, no. I said firmly, I'm having this baby. The doctor smiled. Then let's talk about how to keep you and baby healthy over the next 7.5 months. She scheduled my next appointment for 4 weeks later, gave me a prescription for prenatal vitamins, and handed me a small folder full of information about pregnancy, nutrition, and what to expect in the coming months. When I came out of the exam room, David jumped up immediately. Well, I smiled for the first time in what felt like days. Everything looks good. Due date is May 28th. David's face broke into a grin so wide it was almost comical. May 28th. That's going to be the best day of our lives. The nurse at the checkout desk, who had obviously overheard, smiled at us. Congratulations, you too. First baby, David confirmed proudly. As we left the clinic, David was practically bouncing with excitement. Did you hear that? Everything looks good. Our baby is healthy. His enthusiasm was infectious. Despite everything that had happened, despite all the uncertainty ahead of us, there was something wonderful about his pure joy at the thought of becoming a father. I can't believe this is real, I said. I can't believe we're really going to be parents. I can't believe how lucky I am. David replied, that I get to do this with you. Our final stop of the day was the community college. I needed to talk to someone in the financial aid office about my situation. My mother had filled out the FAFSA forms for me, claiming me as a dependent, but now that I was no longer living at home and couldn't count on her financial support, I needed to see if anything could be changed. The financial aid counselor was a woman about my mother's age named Ms. Peterson. She listened patiently as I explained my situation, leaving out the specific details about why I was no longer living at home. This is a difficult situation, she said finally. Technically, you're still considered a dependent student until you're 24, married, or have a child. But there are provisions for students who are estranged from their families. Estranged. I repeated. The word felt heavy and final. You would need to provide documentation that you're truly independent. Proof of where you're living, evidence that you're supporting yourself, statements from people who can verify that you're not receiving financial support from your parents. And then what? Then we could potentially revise your financial aid package. You might qualify for additional grants, and definitely for work-study programs that could help you earn money while staying in school. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was hope. It was a path forward that didn't require me to choose between my education and my baby. There's something else, I said quietly. I'm pregnant. Will that affect my ability to stay in school? Ms. Peterson's expression softened. Honey, being pregnant doesn't disqualify you from anything. You have the right to continue your education. We have resources to help students in your situation. Childcare assistance, flexible scheduling, even lactation rooms for nursing mothers. I felt tears starting again, but these were tears of relief. For the first time since this all began, someone in an official capacity was treating my pregnancy as a fact to work around, not a problem to be ashamed of. What do I need to do? I asked. Start gathering documentation. Proof of your current living situation, bank statements showing your financial independence, letters from employers, and keep your grades up. The better your academic standing, the more options you'll have. As we left the college, David was quiet. What are you thinking? I asked. I'm thinking about how strong you are, he said. I'm thinking about how you're handling all of this. Losing your mother, being on your own, being pregnant, and you're still thinking about school, still planning for the future. I'm thinking about how lucky our kid is going to be to have you for a mother. That night, as we lay in David's narrow bed trying to find a comfortable way for two people to sleep in a space meant for one, I stared at the ceiling and thought about everything that had happened in just 24 hours. I had lost my mother, my home, and my old life, but I had gained something too. I had gained a partner who loved me unconditionally, a baby who would be born into love instead of shame, and the beginning of real independence. I had discovered that I was stronger than I had ever imagined I could be. It wasn't the life I had planned, but maybe it was the life I was meant to have. Maybe sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted before you can find what you actually need. As I drifted off to sleep with David's arm around me and my hand on my still, flat stomach, I made a promise to myself and to my unborn child. I would never be the kind of mother who made her love conditional on perfection. I would never be the kind of mother who abandoned her child when they needed her most. I would be better. We would be better. And someday, maybe my own mother would realize what she had thrown away. But by then, it might be too late. The first few weeks living with David were harder than either of us had expected. Not because we didn't love each other, but because love doesn't automatically solve the practical problems of two people trying to live in a space barely big enough for one. We developed a system out of necessity. David would get up at 5 a.m. for his construction job, shower quietly, and leave me sleeping. I would get ready for my morning classes, then head to the coffee shop for my afternoon shift. By the time I got home, he was usually back from his night classes, exhausted and covered in sawdust or paint, or whatever material he'd been working with that day. Our conversations became focused on logistics. Whose turn it was to do laundry at the laundromat down the street, how much money we had left for groceries, whether we could afford to turn the heat up another degree as October turned into November. But it was the small kindnesses that got us through those early days. David leaving me little notes when he left for work. Have a good day, beautiful, or don't forget to eat lunch. Me making sure there was always coffee ready for him when he got home from class. The way he would rub my feet when I came home sore from standing all day at the coffee shop. The morning sickness hit hard in my 7th week. I would wake up feeling fine, but the moment I smelled coffee brewing or bacon cooking somewhere in the building, I would be rushing to the tiny bathroom. David started making me plain toast before he left for work, leaving it on a plate next to the bed with a note that said, "For when you feel ready." At work, I did my best to hide what was happening. The coffee shop was small, family-owned, and I was afraid that if Maria, the owner, found out I was pregnant, she might decide I was more trouble than I was worth. So I learned to time my breaks perfectly, to step outside for fresh air when the nausea got bad, to keep crackers in my apron pocket for when my stomach started to turn. But Maria was more observant than I gave her credit for. "Maya," she said one afternoon when the lunch rush had died down, "can I talk to you for a minute?" My heart started racing. This was it. She had figured it out, and now I was going to lose my job. "Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She gestured for me to sit at one of the small tables in the back corner. "How are you doing, honey?" "Really doing?" "I'm fine," I said automatically. She studied my face with the kind of look that reminded me of my mother before everything went wrong. "You know, I raised 4 kids. I know what someone looks like when they're expecting." I opened my mouth to deny it, but no words came out. "I'm not going to fire you," she said gently. "If that's what you're worried about." Relief flooded through me so intensely I almost started crying right there at the table. "But I am going to ask you to be honest with me. Are you getting proper care? Do you have support?" So I told her. Not everything, not about my mother throwing me out or the terrible things she had said. But enough. That I was pregnant, that I was living with my boyfriend, that we were both working and going to school and trying to figure out how to make it all work. "How far along?" Maria asked. "Almost 8 weeks. She nodded thoughtfully. "And the father, he's standing by you." "Yes, he's wonderful. He's been amazing through all of this." "Good. Because you're going to need all the support you can get." She reached across the table and patted my hand. "I'm going to make some changes to your schedule. More morning hours when you're feeling better, fewer afternoon hours when the coffee smell gets too strong. And I'm going to start you on some of the bookkeeping work. You're good with numbers, and it pays a little more." I stared at her, overwhelmed by this unexpected kindness from someone who barely knew me. "Why?" I asked. "Why are you helping me?" Maria smiled sadly. "Because I was 19 and pregnant and scared once too. And I was lucky enough to have people who helped me instead of judging me. Now it's my turn to pay that forward." That night, I told David about my conversation with Maria. We were sitting on his bed, our bed now, eating takeout Chinese food and going over our budget for the 100th time that week. "See," he said, stealing a piece of sweet and sour chicken from my container. "I told you there were good people in the world. People who would support us. One person," I corrected. "One person out of how many who know? One person so far. There will be others." I wanted to share his optimism, but it was hard when my phone stayed silent day after day. No calls from my mother, no texts asking how I was doing, no messages from anyone at our old church. It was like I had simply disappeared from their world. "Have you heard anything?" David asked carefully. "From your mom, I mean." I shook my head. "Nothing. It's been 3 weeks and nothing. Maybe she just needs more time to cool off. Or maybe she meant what she said. Maybe I really am dead to her." David set down his food and pulled me closer. "Then she's an idiot, and it's her loss. She's still my mother. Being someone's biological parent doesn't automatically make you their mother or father. Being a parent is about love and support and being there when your kid needs you. By that definition, your mom stopped being your mother the night she threw you out." His words stung because they felt true, but I wasn't ready to accept that truth yet. "I keep thinking about what she said," I admitted. "About my father. About how I'm just like him." David was quiet for a moment. "What do you know about your father? I mean really know, not just what your mom has told you." "Almost nothing. She said he left when I was 3. She said he was irresponsible and selfish. She said he made promises he couldn't keep. That's about it. That's her version of the story." What do you mean? I mean there are always two sides to every story. Maybe your dad's version would be different. I had never really thought about that before. In my mind, my father had always been the villain of our family story, the man who abandoned his wife and daughter without a second thought. My mother had been the hero, the woman who sacrificed everything to raise me alone. But what if it wasn't that simple? I don't even know his full name, I said. I know his first name was Robert, but that's it. She never told me his last name, never showed me pictures, never talked about his family. That's strange, don't you think? I mean, even if she hated him, you'd think she would have told you something about your other family. Medical history, if nothing else. He was right. It was strange. Most divorced parents, even angry ones, didn't completely erase the other parent from their child's life. There were usually custody arrangements, child support, some kind of contact. Maybe I should try to find him, I said, then immediately shook my head. No, that's crazy. What would I even say? Hi, I'm the daughter you abandoned 16 years ago, and now I'm pregnant and homeless. Maybe you should start by just finding out if he's even still alive. If he is, if he's out there somewhere, don't you think you have a right to know? The thought was both terrifying and intriguing. Part of me had always wondered about my father, what he looked like, what he did for work, whether I had inherited anything from him besides the tendency to ruin my life. As my mother put it, I wouldn't even know where to start. The internet, social media, public records, there are ways to find people if you really want to. That night, after David fell asleep, I lay awake thinking about my father. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to imagine that maybe my mother's version of the story wasn't the whole truth. Maybe there were things I didn't know, pieces of my own history that had been kept from me. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going straight to class after David left for work, I went to the public library. I found a computer in the back corner and started searching. Robert Samaya Johnson / our old address, Robert Johnson, Patricia Johnson / in the year I was born, Robert Johnson / my mother's maiden name, nothing. Hours of searching and I found nothing useful. Robert Johnson was apparently one of the most common names in America, and without more information, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Frustrated, I was about to give up when I remembered something. The necklace. My grandmother's necklace. My mother had said it belonged to my father's mother. If I could figure out what my grandmother's name was, maybe I could work backward from there. I called the Vital Records office for our county and explained that I was trying to get a copy of my birth certificate. The woman on the phone was helpful but clear about the process. I would need to fill out forms, provide identification, and wait several weeks for processing. Several weeks felt like forever, but it was something. It was a start. That afternoon at the coffee shop, I found myself thinking about family, about the family I had lost, the family I was building with David, and the family I might discover. During a slow period, I called David. I did something today, I said when he answered. Good something or bad something? I don't know yet. I started trying to find my father. There was a pause. How do you feel about that? Scared? Excited? Confused? All of the above. Want to tell me about it when I get home? Yeah, I think I do. That evening, I told David about my day at the library, about requesting my birth certificate, about the strange feeling that I was opening a door I might not be able to close again. Are you sure about this? He asked. I mean, what if you find him and he really is everything your mother said he was? What if he wants nothing to do with you? Then at least I'll know, I said. At least I'll know the truth instead of just living with her version of it. And what if you find him and he's great? What if he's been looking for you all these years? What if your mother kept you from him instead of him abandoning you? The possibility hadn't occurred to me, but now that David had said it out loud, it seemed just as likely as the story I had been told. Then I guess I'll know that too. David took my hand and squeezed it. Whatever you find out, whatever the truth is, it doesn't change who you are. You're Maya. You're the woman I love. You're going to be an amazing mother. Your father's story, whatever it is, doesn't define you. I knew he was right, but I also knew I couldn't move forward with my own life until I understood where I had come from. I needed to know my own story, the real story, not the edited version I had been living with. 2 days later, something happened that changed everything. I was working the morning shift at the coffee shop when an older woman came in, probably in her 70s, well-dressed, with silver hair and kind eyes. She ordered a simple coffee and a blueberry muffin, paid an exact change, and sat at the table by the window. I thought nothing of it until she stood up to leave and approached the counter. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you Maya Johnson?" My blood went cold. Nobody knew me here except Maria and the regular customers, and I had never seen this woman before. "Yes," I said carefully. "Do I know you?" The woman smiled, and there was something familiar about that smile, though I couldn't place it. "No, dear, you don't know me, but I've been looking for you for a very long time. My name is Rose Patterson. I'm your grandmother." The world tilted sideways. "My grandmother? Your father's mother?" she said gently. "Robert was my son." Was past tense. "I think," she said, "it's time you learned the truth about your family." I stared at the woman standing in front of me, my mind struggling to process what she had just said. My grandmother. My father's mother. The woman whose necklace I wore around my neck every day. "I'm sorry," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. "Did you say was?" Rose Patterson's eyes filled with sadness. "Yes, dear. Your father passed away 2 years ago. Cancer." The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too warm, too loud. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. I need to sit down." "Of course you do, honey. This is a shock." Rose looked around the coffee shop, which was thankfully empty except for us. "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" Maria appeared from the back room, having heard the conversation. She took one look at my face and immediately understood that something important was happening. "Take your break," she said gently. "Take as long as you need." I led Rose to the corner table where I had sat with Maria just weeks before. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pull out the chair. "How did you find me?" I asked. "I've been looking for you for 16 years, Rose said simply. "Ever since your mother disappeared with you." "Disappeared? What do you mean disappeared?" Rose studied my face carefully. "What has your mother told you about your father? About why he wasn't in your life?" "She said he left when I was 3. She said he was irresponsible and couldn't handle being a father. She said he made promises he couldn't keep and then just disappeared." Rose's expression grew sad and angry at the same time. "Oh, honey, that's not what happened at all." "Then what did happen?" Rose reached across the table and took my hands in hers. Her skin was soft and warm, and there was something comforting about her touch that reminded me of the grandmother I had never known I had. "Your father loved you more than life itself," she began. "From the moment you were born, you were his whole world. He used to carry pictures of you everywhere, show them to anyone who would look. He would come over to my house every Sunday and tell me every new thing you had learned that week." This didn't match anything my mother had ever told me. In my mother's version, my father had been indifferent at best, absent at worst. Then why did he leave? "He didn't leave, Maya. Your mother left. She took you and disappeared in the middle of the night when you were 3 years old." The world stopped. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my history, about why I had grown up without a father, it was all a lie. "That's not. She wouldn't. Why would she do that?" Rose sighed deeply. "Your parents were having problems. They were young. Your mother was only 17 when she had you, and your father was 19. They weren't ready for marriage or parenthood, but they were trying to make it work." 17. My mother had been 17 when she had me. The same age I was now, pregnant and scared and facing an uncertain future. Your father was working construction during the day and going to school at night, trying to get his electrician's license. Your mother was staying home with you, but she was struggling. Postpartum depression, we think now, though nobody called it that back then. She was angry all the time, felt trapped, felt like her life was over. I thought about my mother's reaction to my pregnancy, the way she had talked about love ruining her life, about sacrificing her dreams. Suddenly it all made more sense. Robert tried to be supportive, tried to help, but he was just a kid himself. And your mother, she blamed him for everything. Blamed him for getting her pregnant, for ruining her plans, for trapping her in a life she didn't want. So she left. One night, after a particularly bad fight, she packed up all your things and just disappeared. No note, no forwarding address, no phone call. She just took you and vanished. I couldn't breathe. But surely he tried to find us. Oh, honey, he tried everything. He filed missing persons reports, hired a private investigator with money he didn't have, drove to every city and town he could think of where she might have gone. He spent every penny he had and went into debt trying to find you. Tears were streaming down my face now. All these years, I had thought my father didn't want me, didn't care about me enough to stay. But he had been looking for me. The private investigator finally found a trail about 2 years later. Rose continued. Your mother had changed both your names, moved 3 states away, started over completely. By the time Robert tracked you down, She had convinced the courts that he was an unfit father who had abandoned his family. How is that possible? She told them he was abusive, that he had threatened both of you, that she had fled for your safety. She had documentation. Photos of bruises, hospital records, witness statements. All fake, but convincing enough. My mother had orchestrated all of this. She had not only taken me away from my father, but had made sure he couldn't get me back legally. Your father tried to fight it in court, but he was young, poor, and going up against a system that was designed to protect mothers and children from dangerous fathers. Even though the allegations weren't true, he couldn't prove they were lies. What happened then? The court granted your mother full custody and issued a restraining order against Robert. If he tried to contact you or her, he would go to jail, so he had to make an impossible choice. Keep fighting and risk going to prison, which would definitely mean never seeing you again, or step back and hope that someday, when you were older, you would come looking for him. He chose to step back. He chose to love you enough to let you go. But he never stopped hoping you would find him someday. I thought about the birth certificate I had requested, about my clumsy attempts to search for him online. I was looking for him, I whispered. Just this week I started trying to find him. Rose's eyes filled with fresh tears. He would have been so happy to know that. So proud of the woman you've become. But now it's too late. It's not too late, honey. You're here now, and I'm here. I can tell you stories about your father, show you pictures, help you understand who he really was. And there are other people who loved him, who would love to meet you. Other people. Your father remarried when you were 7. A wonderful woman named Linda who knew all about you, who wanted nothing more than to help Robert find you. They had 2 children together, your half-brother Michael and your half-sister Sarah. They're teenagers now, but they've grown up knowing about their big sister Maya. I had siblings. I had a stepmother who had wanted to know me. I had a whole family I had never known existed. They don't blame me, I asked. For disappearing, for never trying to find him sooner. Blame you. Rose looked shocked. Honey, you were a child. You were told lies about your father your entire life. How could anyone blame you for that? I sobbed then, really sobbed, for everything I had lost, for the father I would never meet, for the years of believing I wasn't wanted when I had actually been desperately missed. Rose came around the table and held me while I cried, stroking my hair the way I imagined a grandmother should. There's something else, she said gently when my tears finally slowed. Something you need to know about why your mother reacted the way she did when you told her you were pregnant. I looked up at her through my tears. When your mother left your father, she was pregnant again. My heart stopped. What? She was about 3 months along. Robert didn't even know, she hadn't told him yet. But when she disappeared, she was carrying his second child. What happened to the baby? We never found out. By the time Robert tracked her down 2 years later, there was no sign of another child. We always wondered, but we never knew for sure. The implications hit me like a physical blow. My mother had been in almost the exact same situation I was in now, young, pregnant, scared, feeling trapped. But instead of facing it, she had run away from everything, including a baby she was carrying. Do you think she... I don't know, honey. We never knew what happened. Maybe she lost the baby naturally. Maybe she gave it up for adoption. Maybe she made a different choice. But I think seeing you pregnant brought back all those memories, all that pain and guilt she's been carrying for 20 years. Everything made sense now. My mother's violent reaction, her insistence that I get an abortion, her cruel words about love ruining lives. She wasn't just reacting to my pregnancy, she was reliving her own trauma, her own impossible choices. She must hate herself, I whispered. I think she does. I think she's been hating herself for a very long time. We sat in silence for a while, both of us processing the magnitude of what had been revealed. Finally, Rose reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. This is your father holding you when you were 2 years old, she said, placing it in my hands. I stared at the picture. The man in the photo had dark hair and kind eyes, and he was looking at the little girl in his arms, me, with such pure love and joy that it took my breath away. This wasn't the face of a man who had abandoned his child. This was the face of a father who adored his daughter. You look just like him, Rose said softly. Same eyes, same stubborn chin. Can I keep this? Of course, I brought it for you. She reached into her purse again and pulled out a small photo album. I brought these too. Pictures of your father, of your stepmother and siblings, of the life he built while he waited for you to come home. I flipped through the album with shaking hands. Pictures of my father at his wedding to Linda, both of them holding a photo of me. Pictures of him at his electrician graduation, pointing to the empty seat he had saved for me. Pictures of him with my half-siblings, telling them stories about their big sister they had never met. In every photo, he looked like he was missing something, like there was a piece of his heart that wasn't there. "He never gave up hope," Rose said. "Right up until the end, he believed he would see you again. I wish I had found him sooner. I wish you had too. But finding each other now, finding your family now, that's what matters." I thought about David, about our baby, about the new life we were trying to build. "I'm pregnant," I told Rose. "That's why my mother threw me out. That's why she said those terrible things to me." Rose's face lit up with joy. "You're going to have a baby. In May. I'm almost 9 weeks along." "Oh, honey, that's wonderful news. Your father would be so excited to know he was going to be a grandfather. Do you think? Would you like to be involved? In the baby's life, I mean? I know we just met, but..." Rose reached across the table and took my hands again. "Maya, I have been waiting 16 years to be part of your life. If you'll let me, I would be honored to be your baby's great-grandmother." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a real family. Not just David and our unborn child, but connections to the past, roots that went deeper than I had ever imagined. "What do I do now?" I asked. "About my mother, I mean. Now that I know the truth." Rose was quiet for a moment. "That's up to you, honey. Your mother made terrible choices, but she was hurting too. She was a scared 17-year-old girl who felt trapped and desperate, and she made decisions that hurt everyone, including herself. Does that excuse what she did? What she's still doing? No. It doesn't excuse it. But it might help you understand it, and understanding might help you figure out if forgiveness is possible." I thought about my mother, alone in that apartment, carrying 20 years of guilt and secrets. I thought about the pain she must have felt every time she looked at me and was reminded of the choices she had made. "I don't know if I can forgive her yet," I said honestly. "You don't have to decide that today, or tomorrow, or even this year. Forgiveness isn't something you do for the other person. It's something you do for yourself when you're ready." Rose stood up and gathered her purse. "I should let you get back to work. But Maya, I want you to know that you're not alone anymore. You have family who loves you, who wants to know you, who wants to be part of your life." She pulled out a piece of paper and wrote down her phone number and address. "This is where I live. It's about an hour drive from here. I'd love for you to come visit sometime, meet Linda and the kids. They've been waiting to meet you for so long." As she headed toward the door, she turned back one more time. "Maya, your father would be so proud of the woman you've become. He would be proud of how you're handling this pregnancy, how you're building a life for yourself and your baby. He would want you to know that you are loved, that you have always been loved, and that love doesn't ruin lives. It makes them worth living." After she left, I sat in that corner booth for a long time, holding the photograph of my father and me, processing everything I had learned. My entire history had been rewritten in the span of an hour. I wasn't the daughter of a man who had abandoned me. I was the daughter of a man who had loved me so much he had spent years trying to find me. I thought about calling my mother, confronting her with what I now knew. But I realized I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. I needed time to process, to heal, to figure out who I was now that I knew the truth about where I came from. When I finally went back to work, Maria took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. "Big news?" she asked. "The biggest," I said. "I found my family." That night, I told David everything. He listened without interrupting, holding my hand as I shared the story of my father's love, my mother's lies, and the family I had never known existed. "How do you feel?" he asked when I was finished. "Angry, sad, grateful, confused. Everything all at once." "What do you want to do about it?" "I want to meet them. Linda, my half-siblings, the family my father built while he was waiting for me. I want to know them, and I want them to know our baby." David smiled. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll build a family that includes everyone who wants to love this baby." As I lay in bed that night, my hand on my growing belly, I thought about the difference between the family you're born into and the family you choose. I had been born into lies and pain and secrets, but I was choosing to build something different. A family based on love and truth and acceptance. My baby would know their great-grandmother Rose. They would know their aunt and uncle, their step-grandmother Linda. They would grow up with stories about their grandfather Robert, the man who loved their mother so much he never stopped looking for her. And maybe, someday, my baby would even know their other grandmother. If Patricia could find a way to heal from her own pain and learn to love without conditions. But that was a decision for another day. Tonight I had everything I needed: the truth about my past, love in my present, and hope for my future. The drive to Rose's house took exactly 1 hour and 12 minutes. I know because I watched every minute tick by on David's dashboard clock, my nerves building with each mile that passed. It had been 2 weeks since Rose had found me at the coffee shop, 2 weeks since my world had been turned upside down again. But this time in a good way. We had talked on the phone several times, and she had invited David and me to Sunday dinner to meet the rest of the family. "You okay?" David asked, glancing over at me as we turned onto Rose's street. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "What if they don't like me? What if this is weird and awkward? What if they blame me for not finding them sooner?" "Maya." David pulled over and parked the car, then turned to face me. "You've been carrying guilt that isn't yours to carry. You were a child. You believed what you were told because children believe their parents. None of what happened was your fault." I knew he was right, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two different things. "Besides," David added with a smile, "Rose already loves you." I could hear it in her voice when she called, "And anyone who loved your father is going to love you too." Rose's house was a small, neat ranch with a well, tended garden and a front porch swing. As we walked up the path, the front door opened and Rose appeared, beaming. "Maya!" She pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home. "I'm so glad you came. Rose, this is David." Rose immediately pulled David into a hug too. "The father of my great-grandchild. Welcome to the family, son." David looked a little overwhelmed but pleased. "Thank you, ma'am." "None of that ma'am business. You call me Grandma Rose, just like Maya's going to." As we walked into the house, I was struck by how warm and lived in it felt. There were family photos everywhere, plants thriving in every window, and the smell of something delicious cooking in the kitchen. "Linda's in the kitchen," Rose said. "She's been cooking all morning, so nervous about meeting you. And the kids are in the living room pretending to watch TV, but really just waiting to get a look at their big sister." My stomach flipped. Big sister? I was someone's big sister. We walked into the kitchen first, where a woman about my mother's age was checking something in the oven. She had auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When she saw me, her face lit up with joy and tears. "Maya," she said softly. "Oh my goodness, you look just like your father. You must be Linda." She nodded, wiping her hands on her apron before reaching out to hug me. "I've been wanting to meet you for so long. Robert talked about you every single day." The mention of my father sent a familiar pang through my chest, but it was mixed with something new. Gratitude that he had found happiness, that he had found someone who understood his love for the daughter he couldn't find. "He would be so proud of you," Linda continued. "So excited about the baby." "You know about that?" Rose told us. "We're all thrilled. This baby is going to be so loved." From the living room, I could hear the low murmur of voices and what sounded like a heated discussion. "Should we tell her to come in here first?" a boy's voice asked. "No, we should wait for Mom to introduce us," a girl replied. "But what if she doesn't like us? Why wouldn't she like us?" Rose chuckled. "They've been like this all morning. Come on, let's put them out of their misery." We walked into the living room, where two teenagers sat on the couch, trying to look casual while obviously stealing glances at me. The boy looked to be about 15, with dark hair like mine and my father's. The girl was maybe 13, with Linda's auburn hair and freckles. "Maya," David Rose said formally, "I'd like you to meet Michael and Sarah." For a moment nobody moved. Then Sarah jumped up from the couch and practically bounced over to me. "You're really our sister?" she asked, her eyes wide with excitement. "Half-sister," I corrected gently. "Sister," she said firmly. "Dad always said you were his daughter, period. That makes you our sister, period." The simple acceptance in her voice brought tears to my eyes. This girl who had never met me before was claiming me as family without hesitation. Michael was more reserved, but he stood up and extended his hand to shake mine. "It's nice to finally meet you," he said seriously. "Dad had pictures of you all over his workshop." "He did." "Oh yeah," Sarah chimed in. "He had this whole wall dedicated to you. Pictures from when you were little, your school photo from when you were in first grade. He somehow got a copy of that. And he even had a picture of you from your high school graduation." I stared at her. How did he have a picture from my graduation? Rose and Linda exchanged a look. "He hired a private investigator every few years," Rose explained gently. "Just to make sure you were okay, to get updates on your life. He knew when you started high school, when you graduated, when you started college. He was so proud when he found out you were going to school to be a teacher." My father had been watching over me from a distance, celebrating my achievements even though he couldn't be there in person. The thought was both heartbreaking and comforting. "Can I see the pictures?" I asked. "Of course," Linda said. "After dinner we'll show you everything. His workshop is exactly the way he left it." Dinner was both wonderful and overwhelming. The table was set for 6, with David and me fitting in like we had always been part of this family. The conversation flowed easily, Sarah chattering about her drama club, Michael talking about his plans to follow in our father's footsteps and become an electrician, Linda asking about my classes and my job at the coffee shop. It was David who brought up the elephant in the room. "Maya's been wondering about something," he said during a lull in the conversation. "She wants to know if you blame her mother for what happened." The table went quiet. Rose set down her fork and looked at me with serious eyes. "Honey, that's a complicated question," she said finally. "I know it is. But I need to understand how you all feel about her because she's still my mother even after everything." Linda reached across the table and took my hand. "We were angry for a very long time," she said honestly. "What she did to Robert, to you, to all of us, it caused so much pain." I nodded, appreciating her honesty. "But over the years," Linda continued, "we've tried to understand why she did what she did. She was so young, probably scared and overwhelmed. That doesn't excuse her choices, but it helps us understand them. Your father never stopped loving her, in a way," Rose added. "Not romantically, he loved Linda with his whole heart. But he never stopped feeling sad about what happened to Patricia, about how much pain she must have been in to do what she did. He used to say he hoped she found peace." Michael said quietly. "He hoped that taking you away from him had somehow made her happy." I thought about my mother alone in her apartment, carrying 20 years of secrets and guilt. "I don't think it did." "No," Rose said sadly. "I don't think it did either." After dinner, Linda led us to the back of the house, to what had been my father's workshop. When she opened the door, I gasped. One entire wall was covered with pictures of me. Baby photos that I remembered my mother taking. School pictures from kindergarten through high school graduation. A few candid shots that must have been taken by the private investigator. Me walking across campus, me working at the coffee shop, me laughing with friends. But it was more than just pictures. There was a certificate from when I made the honor roll in 8th grade. How had he gotten that? A copy of an essay I had written for the school newspaper about volunteering at the animal shelter. A program from my high school's production of Our Town, where my name was listed in the credits for helping with costumes. "He collected everything he could find about you," Linda said softly. "Every little piece of your life that he could get his hands on." In the center of the wall was a large photo of me in my cap and gown at high school graduation, smiling broadly at the camera. Someone had written on the back in my father's handwriting, "My beautiful daughter Maya, 18 years old. I'm so proud of the woman you've become. I hope someday I'll get to tell you that in person." I broke down then, sobbing for the father who had loved me from afar, who had celebrated every milestone without being able to be there, who had died still hoping we would be reunited. David held me while I cried, and I felt Linda's hand on my back, Rose's gentle touch on my shoulder. Even Sarah and Michael were crying, mourning their father's loss all over again. "I never gave up hope," Rose said through her own tears. "Right up until the end, he believed he would see you again." "I wish I had known," I whispered. "I wish I had known he was looking for me." "You know now?" Linda said. "And that has to be enough." We spent the rest of the evening looking through photo albums, Linda and Rose sharing stories about my father, about the man he had been and the life he had built. I learned that he had coached Michael's Little League team, had helped Sarah with her science fair projects, had built Linda a garden gazebo for their 10th wedding anniversary. He had been a good father to the children he could raise, while never forgetting the daughter he couldn't find. As we were getting ready to leave, Sarah grabbed my arm. "Will you come back?" she asked urgently. "I mean, now that we found each other, you're not going to disappear again, are you?" "I'm not going anywhere," I promised. "We're family now." She beamed and threw her arms around me. "I've always wanted a big sister." "Well, now you have one." Michael was more subdued in his goodbye, but as we reached the door he stopped me. "Maya, I just want you to know, Dad never blamed you. For not finding us, I mean. He always said you were just a kid, and it wasn't your responsibility to fix what the adults had broken. Thank you for telling me that. And Maya, I'm glad you're having a baby. Dad would have been an amazing grandfather." On the drive home, David and I were both quiet, processing everything we had experienced. "How do you feel?" he finally asked. I said, like a part of me that I didn't even know was empty just got filled up. They love you. They love the idea of me. I corrected. The me they built up in their minds based on stories and pictures. No. David said firmly, they love you. The real you. I watched them tonight. The way Rose looks at you, the way Linda includes you in conversation like you've always been part of the family, the way those kids claimed you as their sister. That's real love, Maya. He was right. For the first time in my life, I had experienced unconditional love from a family. Love that didn't depend on being perfect, love that didn't come with conditions or expectations, love that simply existed because I existed. I want our baby to know them, I said. I want our child to grow up with this kind of love. They will. Our baby is going to have the biggest, most loving family. When we got back to David's apartment, our apartment, I found a message on my phone from a number I didn't recognize. When I played it, my heart stopped. Maya, it's your mother. I heard from Mrs. Rodriguez that you're doing well, that you're healthy. I was wondering if maybe we could talk. I have some things I need to tell you. Some things I should have told you a long time ago. Please call me back if you're willing to listen. I stared at the phone, my heart racing. After weeks of silence, after throwing me out and telling me I was dead to her, my mother wanted to talk. What do you think? I asked David, playing the message for him. I think, he said carefully, that's up to you. But Maya, whatever she has to say, whatever apologies or explanations she offers, it doesn't change what she did. It doesn't erase the pain she caused. But it might explain it. It might. The question is, are you ready to hear her explanations? Are you in a strong enough place to have that conversation without it destroying the peace you've found? I thought about the day I had just had, surrounded by people who loved me unconditionally. I thought about the baby growing inside me, about the family David and I were building. I thought about my father's wall of photos, his years of hope and love from a distance. I was stronger now than I had been when my mother threw me out. I had support, I had love, I had a sense of my own worth that didn't depend on her approval. I think I am, I said finally. I think I'm ready to hear what she has to say. Then call her back. But Maya, whatever happens, whatever she tells you, remember that you have a family now. You have people who love you no matter what. That doesn't change. I looked around our small apartment, then at the photos Rose had sent me home with. Pictures of my father, of my new family, of the life I was building. David was right. I had a family now. Multiple families, actually. The one I was born into, the one I had discovered, and the one I was creating. Whatever my mother had to tell me, I would face it from a position of strength surrounded by love. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. I met my mother at a small diner across town, neutral territory where neither of us had memories or history. David had offered to come with me, but I knew this was something I needed to do alone. Still, knowing he was just a phone call away gave me the courage I needed. My mother was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold long ago. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, like the weight of whatever secrets she carried had been physically pressing down on her. When she saw me, her eyes immediately went to my face, checking for signs of the damage she had done. The cut on my lip had healed completely, but I could see her searching for other evidence of her violence. Maya, she said softly as I slid into the booth across from her, thank you for coming. You said you had things to tell me. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. I do. Things I should have told you years ago. Things I should have told you before. She gestured vaguely at my face, at the space between us that felt like a canyon. I waited. I had learned something about patience in the weeks since she had thrown me out. Something about letting other people carry the weight of their own words. I heard from Mrs. Rodriguez that you're living with David. That you're doing well. I'm doing fine. And the baby. The baby is fine too. She flinched at my cold tone, but I wasn't ready to make this easy for her. Not yet. Maya, I need you to understand something about the night you told me you were pregnant. I need you to understand that my reaction, it wasn't really about you. Then what was it about? She was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee cup like it might hold the answer she was looking for. It was about me. About choices I made when I was your age. About things I did that I've been living with for 20 years. I thought about what Rose had told me, about the second pregnancy my mother had hidden from my father. What kind of things? Do you know how old I was when I had you? 17. She nodded. 17 years old, your age. I was 17, pregnant and terrified. My parents were furious, threatened to kick me out of the house. The boy your father, He was trying to do the right thing, but we were both just kids ourselves. So you married him. So I married him, and I tried to make it work, I really did. But Maya, I was so angry. Angry at myself for getting pregnant, angry at him for his part in it, angry at you for existing and changing my whole life, before I even knew who I was supposed to be. The honesty of it was brutal, but I appreciated that she wasn't trying to sugarcoat her feelings. Your father was a good man, she continued, and I saw surprise flash across her face at her own words, like she hadn't meant to admit that. He loved you so much, Maya. He loved you from the moment you were born, maybe even before. But I couldn't feel that. I couldn't feel anything but trapped. So you left. So I left. But Maya, there's something else. Something I never told anyone, not even the private investigator your father hired. My heart started racing. I knew what she was going to tell me, but I needed to hear her say it. I was pregnant again when I left. About 3 months along. What happened to the baby? She was crying now, silent tears that she wiped away with shaking hands. I lost the baby. 2 weeks after we moved away, I started bleeding and then I lost the baby. I'm sorry. But Maya, the terrible thing is, part of me was relieved. Part of me was grateful that I didn't have to figure out how to raise 2 children on my own. And I've been carrying that guilt, that shame for 20 years. I could see how that shame had eaten at her, how it had shaped every interaction we'd had about responsibility and consequences, and the weight of choices. When you told me you were pregnant, she continued, it was like looking at myself 20 years ago. Same age, same scared look in your eyes, same impossible situation, and I panicked. I thought if I could make you fix it, if I could make you undo it, then maybe it would somehow undo my own mistakes too. But that's not how it works. No, that's not how it works. And I know that now. I know that hurting you didn't fix anything for me. It just created more pain. We sat in silence for a while. I could see that she was waiting for me to respond, to forgive her, to tell her it was okay. But I wasn't ready for that yet. There's more, she said finally. About your father? I know about my father. She looked up at me sharply. What do you mean? I mean, I know the truth. I know he didn't abandon us. I know you took me and ran, and he spent years trying to find us. I know he hired private investigators and fought you in court, and never gave up hope of seeing me again. The color drained from her face. How do you... His mother found me. Rose, she's been looking for me for 16 years. My mother stared at me in shock. Rose is still alive. Very much alive. So is Linda, my father's second wife, and my half-brother and half-sister who grew up knowing about me, knowing that their father loved a daughter he couldn't find. Oh God, my mother put her face in her hands. Maya, you have to understand, I thought I was protecting you. I thought he was dangerous. You made that up. You fabricated evidence and lied to the courts. I was scared. I was 19 years old with a 3-year-old and another baby on the way, and I didn't know how to fix the mess I had made of my life. So I ran, and then when he found us, I panicked and made up stories because I couldn't admit what I had really done. What you really did was steal 16 years from him. 16 years of watching me grow up, of being part of my life, and you stole 16 years from me too. Years of having a father who loved me, years of knowing my siblings, years of being part of a family that wanted me. Maya, please. And do you know the worst part? He died 2 years ago. Cancer. I will never get to meet my father, never get to tell him that I love him, never get to introduce him to his grandchild, because you were too proud and too scared to admit you had made a mistake. My mother was sobbing now, deep, ugly sobs that drew stares from other customers in the diner. I can't undo it, she whispered. I can't bring him back. I can't give you those years with him. No, you can't. But Maya, I can tell you about him. I can tell you things about your father that maybe his family doesn't know. I can tell you about how he used to sing to you when you couldn't sleep, how he would dance with you in the kitchen while I made dinner, how he cried the day you took your first steps because he was so proud. I felt my anger crack just a little. These were stories I had never heard, glimpses of the father I had never known. He used to call you his little star, she continued through her tears, because you had this birthmark on your shoulder that looked like a tiny star, and he said it proved you were meant to shine. I touched my shoulder unconsciously. I still had that birthmark, had always wondered why my father's family had never mentioned it, and when you were sick, you had pneumonia when you were 2, he stayed up with you for 3 nights straight, holding you, making sure you kept breathing. He loved you so much, Maya. Whatever else I did wrong, I never lied about that. Your father loved you with his whole heart. I was crying now too, mourning for the relationship I would never have, grieving for the man who had loved me so completely from a distance. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I want you to know that the love you felt for your baby from the moment you knew you were pregnant, that's the same love your father felt for you. That's the kind of parent you're going to be. Not like me. Like him." We sat there crying together, mother and daughter, both of us grieving for the same man in different ways. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said finally. "I don't expect you to. I don't know if I can forgive myself. But I want to try. Not for you, but for me. And for my baby. I don't want to carry this anger around forever." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "What would that look like?" "Trying." I thought about it carefully. "It would look like honesty. Complete honesty from now on. No more lies, no more secrets, no more stories that aren't true. I can do that. It would look like you getting help. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes to figure out how to stop carrying 20 years of guilt and shame. Okay. And it would look like you understanding that I have a new family now, that I have relationships with people who love me unconditionally, and those relationships are not a threat to you." "I understand." "Do you?" "Because when I talk about Rose and Linda and my siblings, when I talk about how much my father loved me, you can't get jealous or angry. You gave up the right to be my only family when you threw me out." She winced but nodded. "And if you ever lay a hand on me again, if you ever speak to me the way you did that night, we're done. Forever. I won't put my child in a position where they might witness that kind of violence." "I understand." "Maya, I am so sorry. I'm not ready for your apologies yet. I'm only ready for your changes." She nodded again, and I could see that she understood the difference. "There's something else," I said. "I want you to meet David properly. Not as the boy who ruined your daughter's life, but as the man who loves me and is going to be the father of your grandchild. You want me to meet him. I want you to see who he really is. I want you to understand that he's nothing like what you assumed. And if you can do that, if you can treat him with respect, then maybe we can figure out how to be a family again." "What about the baby?" I put my hand on my stomach, where the tiny life was growing stronger every day. "The baby will know their grandmother, if their grandmother can learn to be the kind of person worth knowing. I want to be. Maya, I want to be better than I was. Then be better. Don't just want it, do it." We talked for another hour and slowly, carefully we began to build something new. Not the mother-daughter relationship we had before. That was broken beyond repair. But maybe something different, something based on truth instead of lies, on respect instead of control. When I got home, David was waiting for me with dinner and questions in his eyes. "How did it go?" I told him everything. About my mother's confession, about the lost baby, about her guilt and shame and the stories she had finally shared about my father. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now she has to prove she meant what she said. She has to show me that she can change, that she can be the kind of person I want my child to know. And if she can't, then we move forward without her. We have Rose and Linda and the kids. We have Maria and the chosen family we've built here. We have each other and this baby. That's enough?" David pulled me close and kissed the top of my head. "More than enough? I want to ask you something," I said, looking up at him. "Anything? Will you marry me?" David blinked in surprise. "Did you just propose to me?" "I did. I know it's not traditional, but nothing about our story has been traditional. And I don't want to marry you because I'm pregnant, or because it's what people expect. I want to marry you because I love you, because you're my partner, because I want to build a life with you that's based on choice, not obligation." David grinned and pulled me into a kiss. "Yes," he said against my lips. "Yes, yes. Even if it means your mother-in-law comes with some serious baggage. Maya, your mother threw you out of the house and you landed with me. If that's baggage, it's the best baggage in the world." 3 months later, I stood in Rose's backyard wearing a simple white dress and my grandmother's necklace, surrounded by the family I had found and the family I had chosen. My mother was there, sitting in the back row next to Mrs. Rodriguez, both of them crying happy tears. She had kept her promise. She was in therapy, she was working on herself, and she was slowly learning how to love without conditions. Linda walked me down the aisle and Rose officiated the ceremony. Sarah was my maid of honor, and Michael stood up with David. As we exchanged vows, I felt my baby move for the first time, a tiny flutter that felt like a blessing, like my father's spirit letting me know he approved. "I promise," I said to David, my hands in his, "to love you not just when it's easy, but when it's hard, to be your partner, not just when we agree, but when we have to work through our differences. To choose you every day, not because I have to, but because I want to. I promise." David said back. To be the kind of husband your father would have wanted for you. To love you the way he loved you, completely, unconditionally, and forever. When the pastor pronounced us husband and wife, the cheer that went up from our small crowd felt like it could be heard all the way to heaven. Later, as we danced our first dance as a married couple, I looked around at the faces watching us. Rose beaming with joy, Linda taking pictures, Sarah and Michael laughing at something, my mother watching with cautious hope in her eyes. Happy, David whispered in my ear. Completely. Even with all the drama and pain and family complications. Especially with all of that. Because it means we chose this, David. We chose each other and this life and this love despite everything that tried to break us apart. And our baby is going to grow up knowing that kind of love is possible. I put my hand on my growing belly, where our daughter was developing strong and healthy. Yes, we had found out it was a girl, and we had already picked out her name, Hope Patricia Johnson Martinez. Hope for the future we were building together, Patricia for the grandmother who was learning to love better, Johnson Martinez because she would carry both our names and all our dreams. She's going to grow up knowing that love doesn't ruin lives, I said, thinking of my mother's bitter words all those months ago. She's going to grow up knowing that love builds lives, creates families, heals wounds. She's going to grow up knowing her grandfather loved her before she was even born, David added, looking over at the empty chair we had set up for my father, decorated with his photo and some of his favorite flowers. As the song ended and our friends and family applauded, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. I had started this story as a scared, pregnant 19-year-old who had been rejected by her mother and thrown out of the only home she had ever known. But I was ending it as a woman who knew her own worth, who had found her real family, who had chosen love over fear and hope over bitterness. I was ending it as a wife, a daughter-in-law, a sister, a granddaughter, and soon to be a mother myself. Most importantly, I was ending it as someone who had learned the difference between the family you're born into and the family you create, and who had been blessed with both. My mother approached us as the dancing continued around us. Maya, she said quietly, I just wanted to say, your father would be so proud of the woman you've become. And I'm proud too. I'm proud to be your mother, even if I don't deserve the title. We're working on it? I said, and I meant it. All of us. We're all working on becoming the people we want to be. She nodded and hugged me gently, carefully, like she was afraid I might break or disappear. I love you, Maya. I've always loved you even when I didn't know how to show it. I love you too, Mama, and so will your granddaughter. As my mother walked away, wiping away happy tears, David pulled me close again. Ready for the next chapter? He asked. I looked around at our celebration, at the people who loved us, at the life we had built from nothing but determination and hope. Ready, I said. And for the first time in my entire life I truly was. Epilogue 5 years later, I stand in my own backyard watching my daughter Hope play with her cousins Michael and Sarah, who are home from college for the summer. Rose is pushing Hope on the swing David built, both of them laughing as they go higher and higher. My mother sits on the porch with Linda, and they're actually talking, really talking, about recipes and gardening, and the book they're both reading for the book club Linda started. It took years of therapy and patience and small steps. But my mother has become the grandmother I always hoped she could be. David comes up behind me and wraps his arms around my waist, and I lean back against him, watching our daughter play. Penny for your thoughts, he says, just thinking about how different everything could have been. Better or worse. Different. If my mother hadn't thrown me out, I might never have found Rose and the rest of Dad's family. If I hadn't gotten pregnant, you and I might have just dated through college, and then gone our separate ways. If my father hadn't died, I might never have understood how precious time with family really is. So you're glad it happened the way it did. I consider this carefully. I'm glad we found our way to where we are now. I'm not glad for the pain, but I'm grateful for what it taught us. Hope runs over to us, her dark hair flying behind her, my father's eyes bright with joy. Mama, Daddy, come push me on the swing. In a minute, baby, I say, scooping her up for a hug. Tell me about your day first. As she chatters about her adventures with her cousins, I catch my mother's eye across the yard. She smiles at me, and in that smile I see not the woman who threw me out 5 years ago, but the woman who has worked so hard to become someone worthy of her granddaughter's love. It wasn't the family I was born into that saved me. It was the family I chose, the family I found, and the family I created through love and determination, and the refusal to let fear win. And as I watch Hope run back to play, carrying all our love and dreams and hopes for the future. I know that the cycle has been broken. She will grow up knowing she is loved unconditionally, knowing that families can be complicated and beautiful and worth fighting for. She will grow up knowing that love doesn't ruin lives. Love creates them.